the March 1st movement remains a powerful symbol of Korean resilience. Today, we're going to go over 5 main topics, which are historical and national identity, diplomacy, cultural and educational narratives, economic relations, and generational impact. So first, we'll start off with historical and national identity. So in 2019, South Korea celebrated the 100th anniversary of the March 1st movement, and with that, the Korean government announced the commencement of several new public works projects, and some of them were repatriating the remains of South Korean activists who were exiled or deported during the Japanese colonial rule. So a lot of their descendants got national merit nameplates and also financial aid from the government. And one of these activists who were repatriated in 2021 was General Hong Bom-do, who organized armed resistance in Manchuria, and he was eventually exiled to Kazakhstan, where he was eventually repatriated. In addition, the South Korean government has also made a lot of new efforts to raise public awareness about the issue of Japanese wartime atrocities, especially towards women. So recently, the Statue of Peace has been getting a lot of international acclaim because it was erected to never let the public forget about the thousands of women who were kidnapped from all over Asia and called the comfort women and served as sex slaves for the Japanese military. In the statue, you can see a young girl who is very reminiscent of the many comfort women who were kidnapped in their early teens, if not their preteens. And underneath, you can kind of see like a shadow. It's like a gray mosaic of an older woman, and this is symbolic of how many of the comfort women survivors today are reaching their 90s, if not in their 90s, and they're still waiting for a formal acknowledgement and apology from the Japanese government. Next, we have diplomacy. So a lot of the Korea-Japan international relations center around pressuring Japan to issue formal acknowledgement and commence war reconciliations. And so in 1993, Japan issued the Kono Statement, which acknowledged the Japanese government's role in the forced mobilization of comfort women. But unfortunately, it was denounced by the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe right after. He claimed that there was no evidence that the Japanese government was compliant in the forced mobilization, and he said that it might as well have just been common prostitution with their consent. He also voiced a very popular Japanese opinion that has been dominating the public sentiment to this very day for decades, in which the future Japanese generation should not be predestined to apologize for the actions of past generations. Similarly, there was another failure in reconciliation over the comfort woman issue. So recently in 2019, Korea and Japan agreed on the Agreement on Comfort Women, where Japan would provide compensation for comfort women victims, and in exchange, Korea promised Japan that the comfort woman issue would be finally and irreversibly put to rest. Unfortunately, 9 months later, it fell apart because there were government leaks that the Prime Minister had only agreed on this because of the public outrage around this issue, and he wanted to silence Korean victims. So after the fact, a lot of comfort women survivors came out, and they said that they never wanted financial compensation in the first place, and they pursued legal action. So in the lawsuit, there were a bunch of mixed verdicts, but it eventually resulted in the court favoring the Japanese government. They claimed that Japan, as a government, had sovereign immunity, which meant that it could commit no legal wrongdoing.
Cultural and educational narratives. Education and popular culture shape how new generations view history, and by extension, the present. Controversies around textbooks are common in South Korea and Japan, particularly regarding how Japanese colonial rule is portrayed. In Japan, textbooks follow the government's Big Brother guidelines, which downplay Japan's colonial atrocities, while Korean textbooks emphasize independence movements like Samilun동. This creates opposing narratives that influence young people's perspectives on each other's countries. In Korean media, Netflix adapted show Pachinko The Battle, Road to Victory, and A to Resistance dramatize anti-Japanese resistance. These films reach wide audiences, influencing public sentiment toward Japan today.
Economic relations. Much of the conflict between Japan and South Korea boil over into economic relations. For example, in 2019, when Japan and Korea entered a sort of economic trade war. The primary triggers were a South Korean Supreme Court order ruled that essentially demanded that Japanese companies such as Mitsubishi Power and Nippon Steel compensate Koreans that were forced into labor under Japanese colonial rule. But Japan argued that they had already been compensated through a 1965 treaty called the Basic Relations Treaty, compensated through financial aid. In response to these court rulings, Japan imposed a control over certain exports, specifically 3 key materials that are essential to South Korea's tech industry: hydrogen fluoride, photoresist, and fluorinated polyamide. This effectively crippled South Korea's supply chain, and it really affected the display manufacturers. In retaliation, Korea ended up removing Japan from their list of preferred trading partners, discouraged people from buying Japanese goods, and encouraged boycotts throughout the country, and even threatened to terminate a military agreement to share information between the 2 countries. Generational impact. The colonization of Japan in Korea left a legacy of trauma that still affects generations today. Korea was a victim of war crimes, genocide, sex slavery, and stripping of traditions and culture throughout the country. This is the root cause of current and past generational trauma in the country today. Old generations tend to hold bitter resentment toward Japan as a whole, and the rocky relationship between the 2 countries over the years have only made it worse for Koreans and Korean diaspora. These older generations have passed this resentment on to younger generations, which is the cause of the anger that's built up throughout the country and the meaning that's been added to celebrating the 1919 holiday.
Hey everybody, it's Steven from Asia Boss. Because we want to bring you the most authentic insight into the latest news and cultural trends from Asia, we have not shied away from doing tough, hard-hitting interviews. One of our most requested topics has been about comfort women, those who were forced into sexual slavery by the Imperial Japanese Army before and during World War II. Well, after months of searching, we were finally able to sit down and talk with one of the last surviving comfort women from South Korea. This is her story.
저희 인터뷰에 이렇게 응해주셔서 너무 감사합니다. 저희가 되게 궁금한 게 많아요. 할머니 솔직한 얘기를 듣고 싶고 좀 진실이 뭔지만 알고 싶거든요. 예, 혹시 지금 연세가 어떻게 되시나요?
나이는 올해 93세.
어디서 태어나셨어요?
경상남도 양산이라는 데서 태어났거든요.
예.
태어나서 그래도 화목한 집안에서 살았는데 그때만 해도 진용진병으로 젊은 청년들은 전부 징발 다 해갔거든. 일본서 조선 땅으로 저거가 딱 써있겠는데 저거 마음대로 할 수 있다 이 말이야. 2차 대전이 턱 일어나자 학교 다니는 학생들까지 학도병이라 해가지고 전부 다 끊고 갔거든. 남자들만 끊고 갔으면 그만이지만 여자들 강제 모집이라고 소문이 나더라고.
강제로 한다는 게 집으로 찾아와서 이렇게 막
그렇지.
데려오나요?
그래 내가 가기도 싫어하는 대로 강제로 저쪽에서 모집을 하는 게라. 진영 징병이 어떤 데고 물으니까 엄마가 2차 대전이 일어나고 전장을 치고 있을 때는 군인들 군복 집는 공장이라 하더라고. 손이 모질해서 젊은 처녀들로 모집을 한다. 그래가지고 시집을 갈 때 되면은 나이가 되면 언제든지 보내준다. 그러니까 안 가면 안 된다.
가기 싫다고 하면요.
살림 전체 살림 압수 해피고 조선의 몬사리실이 추방시키 빈다는 게요. 진산 몰수 해피고 나면 뭐 빈손으로서 어디 가서 어떻게 살 겁니까? 손마들 공장이라 하는데 죽기 하겠나? 그래 가겠다고. 갔는데 제2부두에서 밤 연락선을 타고 아침 되기는 신문을 새끼 도착하더라고. 우리들이 식구들이 한 30명, 32명 이래 됐거든.
여자들이 30명 정도가 같이
19살, 18살, 20살 막 그런 정도지. 제일 내가 나이가 제일 작았지.
그때 나이가 14살.
그렇지. 만으로는 14살이고 우리 나이는 15살이지. 그래 있다가 며칠인가 지나고 나서 배가 왔다고. 그래가지고는 대만까지 가는 게라. 내려가지고 이제 다른 배가 오도록 기다려야 돼.
근데 뭐 이상하다는 느낌은 안 받으셨어요? 왜 이러지? 약간.
나이가 어려서 그러는지 그런 생각은 처음부터 해보지를 못했어요. 아직까지 지 장소에 안 갔다 하는 것만 알고 있었지 어떻다 하는 거는 모르고 있었는데 수일이 지나가지고 배가 왔다 해서 타고 가니까 그때가 강동이라 강동. 자 내리니까 일본 높은 군인들이 저기에 앉았더라고요. 그래 이제 나이가 몇 살 먹나? 근데 저 나이로는 14살밖에 안 되는데 좀 애롭지 않나 그런 생각을 이상하게 고비를 얇던 그릇 하더라고. 그때 안으로 들어가라고 해서 안으로 들어가 보니까 일생兵들 부대에서 나와갖고 검사를 하더라고. 몸에 전부 검사를 하고 숙소로 가라. 거기 큰 학교인가 무슨 공장인가는 모르겠지만도 이런 넓어. 그래 방위에 턱 올라서서 이래 보면 그쪽 방에 있는 거 다 보여요. 그 누구까지 하는 것까지 다 보여요. 억지로 끌려가서 기사대기 몇 차례 맞고 그 말로 듣고 나이 아주 나이가 어리니까 피가 막 나잖아요. 담요에 피가 묻고 이래고 그래 그거를 끌고 날이 새자 끌고 그 빨래터로 올라가니까 친구 둘이도 그래 당하고 앉아가 울고 있더라고. 이래가 우리 어떻게 살겠나? 차라리 죽는 게 안 낫겠나? 어떻게 해서 죽나? 술이라도 막 되게 많이 먹으면 죽는다던데 그렇지만 돈이 있나? 내가 떠날 때 우리 엄마가 그때 돈 1원 큰 돈이라 1원을 뭉쳐주면서 그걸 가서 배고프고들랑 이거로 가지고 그래 사먹고 해라. 그럼 그거 가지고 한번 해보자고. 그 일하러 다니는 여자가 있어. 여자가 오늘 불러가지고 그래서 돈을 1원을 주면서 그래 이래 먹고 이래 탁 꺼놔지는 거 사다 주라고 하게. 그래 가지만 빼갈로 막 대병이 막 이런 대병이 한 병하고 이래가 마시고 이래 물 이래 마시라. 입에 떼니까 막 입이 타는 것 같아요.
예.
처음에는 나중에는 이 감각이 없어. 그래가지고 가서나 서희가 그걸 다 먹었어요.
그 큰 술을 다 드셨어요?
그래 다 먹지. 서희가 다 먹고 다 뿌대지 빼는 기라. 가만히 좀 죽지. 해가 그 술을 먹고 또 하고 서희가 안 비우고 하니까요. 어디로 가는 거 차도 땡겼다가 그 세탁 하는 대로 오고 있겠네요. 가지나 서희가 뻗어져가 있어. 우리 희생병들이 나와가지고 막 씹어내죠. 전부 지금도 이거 위로 내가 무엇을 임석을 많이 못 먹고 이래죠. 이가 시원찮다. 열흘 만에 눈을 뜨는데요. 아, 천장이 뱅뱅뱅뱅 돌아가는 게 아주 정신을 못 차리겠더라고. 그래가지고 죽도 못하고 살았지요. 이래가지고 되는 일 아니다. 어떠한 일이 있어도 우리가 살아서 돌아가서 이를 폭로를 해야 되는데 청상 살아서 돌아가자면 지금 말로 안 들을 수가 없다. 그래가지고 시키는 대로 하기는 막 우리를 맞지는 않아요.
근데 어떤 걸 시켰는데요?
날만 생문을 저 상대하는 게지.
근데 그걸 하루에 몇 번?
토요일 날은 난 12시부터 시작해가지고 저녁 6시까지 줄로 쓴다고요.
줄로 서요?
야, 미차 안 나오면 막 문 딱 두드리고 빨리 나오라고 하게 돼.
계속 이제.
그렇지. 하나 나가면은 또 그거는 이제
Okay, thank you.